travel all over the country just listening to speakers and taking a ton of classes. And I can honestly say that John is my favorite orator just to listen to. I don't care what he's talking about. So, regardless of what his speech is, which is always a learning experience, we always come back and I'm like, hey, remember 2 years ago when we had this talk? This is what came from it. What I've never missed one of his speeches that I know of since I started coming to these. Even when I'm not on site, I always make it back on site. But he's got a natural cadence and a natural ebb and flow. Every speech he's ever given, I've been able to follow the hero's journey through. So I appreciate you coming to these and donating your time. We certainly know you don't need to, but you guys are in for a treat.
Appreciate it, David. Thank you so much. I'm honored. I was going to pay him, but he doesn't want my worthless Federal Reserve notes. And I don't hate money, so I'll keep them. Hey, guys, How to Read the News is my title today. I like to come up with some goofy titles every now and then because, let's face it, I always talk about money and the economy. And I'm going to do that at some point today if I get through it all quick enough. But I want to focus on how to read the news because, you know, especially in our community that we see and know about a lot of propaganda, although you would think even after what we lived through the pandemic, more people would be switched on to it. They're obviously not. I wanted to kind of share with you my philosophy on it all, and we'll go through it. By the way, if you really want to hear about the economy and wealth and things, another title for this could be Ignore the News and Build Wealth. Okay, so watch for that. And then finally, I'm more optimistic than the regular prepper. A reason for that, we could title this Being Optimistic While the World Burns. So my talk today, you'll hear some parallels with many other speakers, especially with Alan, talked a couple days ago about the economy. I might even bring up Bretton Woods or something at some point. Alan and I are starting from the same point. We parallel in many ways. We sort of diverge in our outcomes, but for different reasons. Alan is a wonderful human being with a big heart. He wants to do what's best and save the world. I just want to make money. Okay? So that's where we depart. Who believes the news has become biased? Let me see a show of hands. Now I'm hearing back there from the back, it's always been biased. Let me tell you something. 1976, 78, 79, something like that. 1968, 69 in that range. I would go to my grandfather's. My Anthony knows about papas. I'd go to my papa's house. He had a little black and white TV. We would sit there. We would watch the evening news with Walter Cronkite. My grandfather would yell at the top of his lungs, "Bullshita," and he'd call Walter Cronkite a communist. Okay, so it's always been this way, guys. I'm telling you. That stuck with me. For a while, I thought my grandfather was just crazy and entertaining. But as I got older and grew up and I read things like, 1984, and I just started to expose myself more to these things, I found out that my grandfather knew more than I could have ever imagined. And I won't get into his whole story, but he was a very insightful, switched-on guy, and that's why he thought it was all bullshita. And so as I matured and became an adult and started working and investing in things and building my career, I knew the media was biased from day one, again, from the time I was a little kid. By the way, my grandfather did not believe that. I watched this with him when Apollo landed on the moon. He didn't believe it ever happened. I personally do. I mean, I believe it, but my grandfather, no way. He literally said bullshit as he watched it on our little black and white TV. But so I knew the media was biased, and my cynical nature said, well, let's follow the money, right? It's all about the money. And we know, and I don't know how long it's been true, and it's evolved over the years, but for the most part, there's always been a big six. There's always about 6 corporations that control close to 100% of the media. And those names come and go, and they change, and they conglomerate, and they spin and sell off. And in our more modern times, in the last 15 to 20 years, some of those have not been traditional corporations or media corporations. They become what we call big tech, right? The big tech has really become big media. So whether it's Alphabet, Google, or Meta, Facebook, and more Amazon coming in with streaming and their advertising, these are the people that control the media. And it is literally a collusion across multiple platforms and interest groups and institutions. It's not all about the corporations, it's the government, it's the education system, it's everything. And I believe it was all about the money. So I'd say follow the money. But then things didn't always make sense. And I'll just give you a couple examples. There's cases where these media companies, these corporations, which we know are all greedy and they want profit, but they do things that are not really in their best interests, right? I give you an example. Disney could make more money if they made better movies, right? They choose not to. They alienate probably 80% of their potential addressable market by a lot of the crap they put out, right? I mean, really, how many transgendered, whatever modifiers you want to put on that, are there that they would have the emphasis they do? They're not getting a return for the propaganda they put out, right? If they marketed to like Barbie dolls to like little girls that want to play with dolls, right, they'd sell more dolls, right? But they go on all these extremes. They do that with their movies. They do that with their products. So it's not all about the profit. So they got to ask it, if it's not about profit, what's it about? Same thing with Starbucks is another great example. Their CEO is, founder has come and gone, is CEO multiple times, but they're famous for wanting to start dialogues and conversations, which are all one particular way, right? I mean, if they just shut their mouth, they'd sell a lot more coffee, right? They literally give up coffee sales to promote an agenda. So it's not all about the money. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk are also examples of billionaires, just two that I could think of off the top of my head, that went out and have lost money buying media companies, right? X or Twitter in the case of Musk, and Washington Post in the case of Bezos. These are not money-making operations. So why do they do it? Well, if it's not about profit, what's it about? It's about control. It's about control more than anything. And I got the little army man soldier picture up there. If you're ever playing war as a little kid, if you ever served in the military, when your little invading force goes in, you always go and attack the radio station or the TV station or whatever first, right? Because you want to control that media. If you can control the media, you can control the narrative. And that's literally what it's all about. And again, it's not just corporations. It's not just the media. It's not just news. And it's not there to what they tell you. It's not there to inform you. It's not there to educate you. It's not there to entertain you. Because again, if it was, and if it was there for a profit motive, they'd do it a lot differently than the way they do. So it's the normal cast of characters. And, it's literally a revolving door of collusion. It starts out with a special interest wanting something, and it depends on how they're feeding the narrative, but a lot of times it goes to the news, right? They broadcast a certain news narrative. They get that backed up, and it gets picked up by social media. They make Hollywood movies with that theme in it, whether it's sports teams or, singers, actors, Hollywood, they all get involved in it. Academia gets thrown in, and they do studies and have experts. Then, magically the government comes in and creates some kind of policy, and almost the end result is always it's some kind of favorable corporate policy to promote profits for a particular industry. We talked about, Ken was even talking about brewing bourbon, right? It's like they create a law about exactly the way you have to use a barrel, and oak tree prices, the price for oak tree lumber goes up because there's a law around it, right? It occurred because of tax, whether it's Scotch or whether it's Kentucky bourbon, right? There was a law associated with it. And I would, again, submit to you that it's not like one Illuminati group or anything. It's just all these people acting together, but they're all acting together. The one common denominator is they're all acting together to either lie to you or to manipulate the truth, right? That's the key. Doesn't really matter. I'm not really in the how or why business. I'm just in the now business. And I know that they're all lying or they're modifying the truth. And about that narrative, at best, it's a distortion of the truth. Okay, I've got Winston Churchill up here. We've kind of come, and I actually saw an article not too long ago, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal or somewhere. It was talking about, is World War II the new religion? Because, we talk about it now, about the greatest generation and, an honorable war or worthy war. Well, was it? Were all the things done so great on one side versus all the bad on the other? Maybe not. again, at best, the truth is distorted. Okay. Pravda, it was the Russian newspaper back. There's still a version of it, I think, but the real original one, it means truth, right? That's the point of it. Trump, when he started his media company, what did he name it? Truth Social, right? So everybody wants to tell you the truth. And I think like when you see a bill from the government or the House passes a bill or names a bill, the name of it is usually the opposite of what you're getting in most cases, right? Inflation Reduction Act had nothing to do with reducing inflation. So when someone names something truth, it's probably not, okay? And at best, it's a distortion of the truth. And again, this is nothing new for you scriptorians. I got a quote from the Gospel of John. What did Pontius Pilate say to Jesus? What is truth, right? So it's not like just in our times. This has always been this way. There's always a battle between good and evil. Now, I mentioned that at best, it's a distortion of the truth. I would argue that most of it is a total lie, or as my grandfather would say, bullshita. Now, you know the liar on the right, really no introductions there. And again, this is so blatant. You would think that people would have figured this out after what we went through for a couple years there. This guy, among the many things he did, if you followed nothing else, you knew that at the very beginning, he told you when the supply of masks weren't there for emergency workers, he told you not to wear a mask. They wouldn't do any good. Once they got enough of them, he told you to wear them along with all kinds of stupid controls, again, which controlled you. Then when it was also blatantly obvious for anybody that wasn't smart enough to figure out to begin with it didn't work, he told you to wear 2 masks. Really? The same guy did the same things, right? I mean, it's blatant. It's not like disguised. The younger guys may not know the guy on the left. Who recognizes him? Baghdad Bob. Baghdad Bob, for those of you who don't know, I think it was 2003, the invasion of Iraq. Baghdad Bob, literally, as the invasion, I mean, when the Marines are minutes of taking over the city, yeah, Baghdad Bob is on TV on CNN telling his people as well as the world that everything's fine, nothing to see here. You know, we're defending the mother country, right? Yeah. Total lie, right? Total. It lied as much as the other liar, right? Total lies. So keep that in mind, right? What they're telling you is either a fabrication, a distortion, or it's a total lie. Now, I'm going to even take this a step farther. Maybe they need to lie, okay? You guys may know him. Anybody know him? Jay Powell. He's the president of or chairman of the Federal Reserve. If Jerome Powell came out today and said, let me tell you guys, I'm going to tell you the truth. The economy is going to go to hell. There's going to be a disaster. I mean, literally, we know what, XYZ is going to happen. And literally by tomorrow, the markets are going to be down. It's going to be tight. We have to tighten our belts. If he came out with some bad news like that, even if he was lying, what would happen? Right? The markets would crash. Right? So it's almost like, and I'm not justifying what they do, but I'm almost telling you here that they have to lie. Right? They can't tell you the truth because it would cause whatever they're warning you about. So again, they're either lying on purpose, blatantly, they're distorting it for their own goods, or they can't tell you the truth for your good. In any case, it's a lie, right? Don't believe it. And you may say, well, John, I got my media source, right? I listen to this, or I listen to that, or have you listened to Joe Rogan or whatever, right? Your guy. Let me tell you, this is my opinion, but all media, one way or another, is either a total lie or a distortion of the truth, one way or the other. And you see the numbers I have up there. Everybody hates Congress, right? Congress approval ratings like 15%, but 48% of the people love their congressman, right? And that number's come down way. It used to be like 80% of people loved their congressman. They hated Congress, but they loved their congressman. We're like that with our media sources. And so my challenge would be just be cynical across the board, okay? And just for controversy, because I like to stir things up, almost all of Bitcoin news originates from one of these two corporations, right? What's the quote? Prove me wrong or change my mind or whatever. Not that Bitcoin is not a good thing, but I'm just telling you, research it and you'll see a lot of flow comes from these guys, no differently than it would come from Wall Street Journal or Barron's or Reuters or somebody else on Wall Street, right? I mean, everybody has a narrative and a story to tell. They just do. Okay, doesn't mean they're all wrong. Doesn't mean they're all absolutely wrong. But don't wear blinders. Open your mind up. The sad part about the way this propaganda works is that most of it's self-imposed. Okay, you self-censor yourself. And a lot of it is like what I just talked about. You're not going to look at other media sources because you obviously know that CNN's a liar, or you obviously know that Fox News is a liar. Okay, but you'll believe what everything's on CNN, or you'll believe everything on Fox, vice versa. You're censoring yourself by doing that, right? Self-censoring, because again, neither one's probably telling the truth. The reason this often happens, I believe, is as Ken Berry talks about, like, a primal diet and things. I think a lot of this has to do with our evolutionary development. It's in our DNA to be socialized and to be innately curious. Okay, we thrive on new things, and so the media plays on that by looking at our socializing characteristics. Right, we have a herd mentality. Back in ancient days, caveman days, call it what you want. If you wanted to be accepted by your tribe, you had to be like the tribe, right? And the tribe had your back, right? There was a reason for that. You took care of each other. If you were an oddball or you went against the social norm, you were shunned. Okay, so you had to adapt. You had to be like everybody else. We have that desire, right? That's why they call it social media. They're trying to pull you into their version of the society. The other thing about it is that innate curiosity. We are curious people. That's one reason I have such an optimistic outlook on the economy, is because we're always coming up with new things, right? New technologies, new ideas. Think about the guy up there with the tiger, whatever that is. And this is where a negative bias comes in. If you're observing your background, if you have situational awareness, if you don't acknowledge or you miss the cues of opportunity, you're usually okay, right? But if you miss the cues of danger, then you get eaten by the tiger, right? And so you don't have kids. And so genetically, we're predisposed to put more emphasis on negative and bad news and threats than we are on good news and optimistic news. Okay, so we have a built-in genetic negative bias. And I'll show you how this works in the stock market. I got a chart of the S&P 500 for the last 100 years. And it goes up and down. We all know that, just like Bitcoin goes up and down. Things go up and down. But you would be hard-pressed to find a long period of even like 6-month continuous pullbacks. I mean, almost every 6 months it's up. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but it's much more than random. That it's up much more of the time 6 months from now than it is down. But if you look at any investor survey, and I've got an example of it in those bar graphs up there, 62 or more % of investors, and these are supposed sophisticated investors, not just guys on the street, but 62% of active investors think that the market's going to be flat or down in the next 6 months. Yeah, and he's coming later. It almost never is, right? So around 37% of the people are only ever right, right? And it's that negative bias, right? It's how that works. We want to look for things that are going to hurt us so we don't get hurt. And likewise, that ends up hurting us. So as far as these lies, that innate curiosity we have, they call news because it's new, right? It's new. What is the news? What is new? Again, in our DNA, we are always seeking out new things. We want to find that next thing. It's an obsession with us. We can't help ourselves. And so they're always promoting something that's new. One way to identify the lie is to ask yourself, is what I'm seeing, is it new? And I would venture to say probably 80 or more % of the time, it's not new. It's not only not relevant, it's just not new. They're rehashing an old story. They're bringing up an old narrative. They're talking about some kind of historical event. And so once they don't present you with the news, or once you determine something's not even new, you probably should just stop there and not even go any further. But then what they next do is they pile on the experts, right, to justify the narrative. Again, you pull up that chart of the stock market, any given 6 months, it's gonna go up. Oh, by the way, in that chart, when I said about the 62%, it's not always the same people, right? When the red team's in charge, the blue team's all negative. When the blue team's in charge, the red team's all negative. The people fluctuate, but the majority negative people always stays the same. And that's because they parade out these experts that we believe in, and they tell us whatever version of the narrative. But when you look at that chart, although the market's always up, individual stocks go down all the time, like all the time. They go down 10%, 20%, 30%. But if you look at the experts, the analysts, over 96% of the time, they have a buy or a hold on the stock. They almost never tell you the stock's going down when you can clearly see with your own eyes it is going down. The experts are wrong, right? Again, are they lying to you? Are they incompetent? It doesn't matter. They're just wrong. But they'll parade all kinds of reports and surveys. Again, historical comparisons. You're always seeing about how this is related to the stock crash in 1929, or this is related to the bull market of 1980. The things that have no comparison to today. They'll try and pull in that historical background with it. Among these experts, I call some of them one-hit wonders. Have you ever seen the millions of that one guy that predicted the financial collapse in 2008? Like, there's one guy that did it, but there's like 800 of them on TV all the time. But there's only one guy that predicted it, supposedly. And they'll roll out these guys and say, he predicted it, blah, blah, blah. Well, what's he done in the last 17 years? Even if he did predict it, what's he done in 17 years? What did he do yesterday? What did he say was going to happen? Don't fall for that. You also see, and this is geared more to investing, obviously, but these things apply no matter what you're looking at. There's always secrets of something, right? Secrets of the rich, how the billionaires do it, right? There are no secrets. If they are, they wouldn't tell us because they're secrets, right? So if it starts out with something like that, some little, and again, this is that socializing and getting you're part of that group, right? And we know about that big group that none of us are in, right? So just don't even believe it. Buzzwords and cliches. This is my favorite. For you younger guys, you probably don't even know this. Watergate was the hotel where the bugging took place during the whole Nixon thing in the 1972 when they bugged the Democratic convention stuff, right? It was in the Watergate Hotel that it took place. So that was thus the name Watergate. Since then, every non-scandal that they want you to think is a scandal, they put gate on the end of it, right? Gate, something. If you see anything with a gate on it, chances are it's not a scandal. I give an example. There are few to no Epstein Gate references that I've found. There might be some out there, but you know what it is? It's Epstein files. Why? Because it's a scandal, right? If it weren't a scandal, if they were trying to make it a scandal, they would have put gate on it. So look for these little nuances. Climate change is another one. And again, I'm not disputing the climate changes. I'm not even disputing that man's responsible for it. But in the last at least 15 years, I have not seen a board of directors meeting, any kind of government meeting, press release, any of that stuff that doesn't mention climate change, even though it has nothing to do with what they're talking about, right? They'll always preference climate change, this or climate change. And like, you're talking about something totally unrelated to anything that's factored on the climate, but they got to bring it up, right? So they're just always interjecting that stuff. The other thing is distractions, and this is what really happens all the time. They're like magicians. They want to take your eye off the hand that's doing the trick. But I would say anytime you hear about the JFK assassination or UFOs or any of this other stuff, they're distracting you, right? They're like, we're going to release the latest UFO files or something. It's because they don't want you to see something else that's going on. I wouldn't fall for that. Canada is the 51st state. I think that's a classic Trump diversion. And I would tell you, and we'll see if my prediction comes out later, but watch what happens with not Canada, but with our neighbor to the south, Mexico. Right now, there are billions and billions of dollars being invested in Canada or in Mexico. And if anybody's going to become a 51st state, it's going to be Mexico. Not that they would, but I mean, all the money, all the investment, all the future connections are in Mexico, not in Canada. And I think they don't want you to know that because they're putting all the emphasis on Canada. And you'll notice too, right away, Canada, their new prime minister is like elbows up strategy and all the while. Meanwhile, the smart lady in Mexico is keeping her mouth shut. She's biding her time and she's making all the good deals she can as she gets the investment. So keep your eyes on that. Attacks and name calling. And this is where Trump says a lot of things I hate and does a lot of things I don't like, but he is a master, right? He has mastered the name calling and the attacks, right? And it's beautiful in the way that the tables have just been turned on the other side, right? Because for years, everyone's been a Nazi or a this or a that. And Trump just comes out and whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter. Of course I don't pay taxes. Stupid people pay taxes. All right. He'll say that, or, I didn't pay that woman for sex. She's too ugly. I wouldn't pay that woman, right? He's just a madman, right? And I'm not saying I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying it's genius. I mean, genius if you watch it. So watch all those things. Bottom line, though, artificial intelligence, and Ken and other people have talked about this. Man, it is Orwellian what's coming, right? Because, Ken showed you about how you could mimic his voice and all that stuff, and we didn't know. Yeah, imagine all the other things that are mimicked are going to be mimicked in the future, and none of us will know what's real and what's not. And that, if you've never read 1984, read that because it's all over that book. I read that book in about 1984, by the way. It's when I found out my grandfather was a lot smarter than I thought he was. So how do you read the news? First of all, I try to read the news, right? I didn't pick that title by chance. I don't like to view things because if I view it, I'm emotionally attached, right? The voice pulls me in, or the visual image, or the expert on the screen, right? I try and really read things because it takes a lot of emotion out of it. So I'm trying to avoid that. And I'll say straight up front, I have not watched the news, like the news, since 1982. Around there, 1992, I'm sorry, 1992. The Bill Clinton first Bush race, 1992. Okay, and it hasn't hurt me any. Okay, I have not watched it. So read it rather than watch it, and then right away check your biases. Remember, you're naturally disposed to be negative. You're gonna find the things that resonate with something that's wrong because you want to protect yourself. That's natural. But it's also not necessarily the truth. So watch for your bias. Also watch for your bias if Fox says something and you believe Fox News, that check your bias there. I'll tell you a little secret. Fox News lies. Okay. Shh, don't tell me. Again, the news is supposed to be new. So ask yourself, is it new? Are they just rehashing an old UFO story? Are they just trying to divert my attention on something that happened 30 years ago? Are they making a comparison with something that has literally, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs? I'm not an economist, but I'm telling you, the world today is a lot different than it was then, right? And you can't just say if you do this, that's going to happen, because it's different. They're different times. And when they make that easy argument, it's dumbing down your intelligence. And again, it's not to say that tariffs are good or bad. You have to do the research. Don't just believe it because they tell you this or that happened. The biggest part of this is look for the lie, right? Because now it's either a distortion or it's an outlaw lie. So look for the lie. What actually is that lie? And when you figure out that it is a lie, you can fact check it. I can remember, to me it seems like yesterday, but it was a long time ago, you couldn't fact check things. I'm sure Jack sat in a barracks like I did many a time, and someone would be telling us a story. I was in the Marines. We call them sea stories, sea tales. You didn't know if they were true or not. Some guy had a good idea. He was the loudest voice. We all believed him. He's like, all right, tell us some story. Now you got an internet, right? You can look that stuff up and see if it's true, see if it's false. First time when I see a story, I read the headline. It says jobs are up or down, blah, blah, blah. Jobs being down is bad for the economy. I'm going to start looking for facts as to, are the jobs up or down? Does the fact that the jobs reports up or down have any bearing on the economy? Does it really matter about the things I care about in the stock market? Who wrote the article? Is this guy or gal that wrote the article? Are they always writing negative bias stuff? Are they always promoting the red team? Are they always promoting the blue team? Right? All that stuff is at your fingertips now. And fortunately, AI makes it even easier. But again, that's Orwellian, and you got to be careful with it, and because it is consensus based, right? It's going to give you the party line. So you'd have to dig deep on it, but it is there. The knowledge is there for you to figure out on your own. The big part, though, is who is benefiting, right? And we know it's some Illuminati guy out there, but some faction within the Illuminati. I'm using that as a fun term, right? I'm not necessarily saying I believe in the Illuminati. I could perhaps be a member. Who would know? But focus on who it's benefiting, because if you can figure out who it's benefiting, then you're likely to figure out if it's a likely outcome. Okay, and this is where I diverge from a lot of you guys and from Alan. And again, I'm not disagreeing with anything Alan said. I love Alan. But when I look at these things, I don't look at the way I'd want them to be, or the way I hope they're going to be, or even the way they should be. I look at them as like, who's going to win? There's a couple mafia people fighting. Which family's going to win? Because I want to bet on the side of the winning mafia, right? So if you can figure it out, if you're going to figure out what's likely to happen, even if you agree with it or disagree with it, even if it's bad for you, if it's a bad, if you were living in 1939 Germany and you were Jewish or a Mason or gay or any of the other things that they hated, if you were in that demographic, you may not want it to happen. You may not like it's going to happen. You may not even believe it's going to happen. But if you think it's likely to happen, you better get the heck out of the country, right? So do something about it. And you have that internet, you can start making some of these rational decisions, figure out if it's likely to happen, and if it is, how you can benefit or how you can reduce the pain. Woke. We couldn't talk about the media without talking about woke. As far as the woke virus, I don't buy the argument that it's a cultural war. I think it's a very effective tool to propagate a lie. Okay, think about it. And Jack talks about this all the time, of dumbing down the common denominator, just making people stupid, dumb and dumber. Wokeism is just taking the simplest part of the argument, right? So you think of our founding fathers. They discussed and wrote and argued and debated principles of freedom, principles of liberty. They studied the Greeks and the Romans and all the societies and histories that they had information of. What caused prosperity? What caused slavery? Right? And then they argued about it for years. Eventually, they came up with things that we know today, like the Second Amendment or property rights. Right? So these are not like simple concepts. It's really simple to say guns kill, right? Or it's really simple to say everybody should have free health care, or that guy's too rich, right? Or I want what she has. It's not fair that she has what she has. It's easy to say that. It's hard to make the argument about property rights or about your right to bear arms. Those are harder, complicated things. So wokeism, it isn't so much that we know they don't want you to have guns. I mean, I get that, but there's other reasons. There's the other reasons they take that argument, because it's just simpler. It's simpler to say guns kill, forget about it, off the table, you shouldn't have guns. They don't want to make a debate about it. They don't want to intellectually argue about things. Another part is just about that whole narrative. Wokeism achieves particular narratives, and climate goals are an easy example of that. Again, not the only, but a very easy example. Almost every climate goal or climate law or climate policy that I've ever seen, it always involves you paying more in taxes and having less freedom, right? So it's more control, more taxes. Every solution, or there's no solutions that are opposite to that. So that's a great argument if you want control and you want to raise taxes. So it isn't that they believe in that stuff, because if they believed in it, they wouldn't be flying around in their private jets, would they? Ad hominem attacks. Again, we already talked about that and Trump being the master of it, but that's a classic woke thing, right? You're not going to debate the argument. You're going to debase the character of the person you're talking to, right? You're going to call them an idiot. You're going to call them a Nazi, a fascist. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to make an intellectual argument. You simply just say they're stupid. And again, Trump is master troll of that. Hands down, he's the best I've ever seen. He is a lifelong Democrat, by the way. Virtue signaling. I didn't get a laugh out of that. Oh, you're all sleeping after lunch. Wokeism is also all about virtue signaling, right? The guy's not going to say he's a greedy rich bastard, or he's going to say, I care about children, right? It's all about, I care about the environment. I care about clean water. He's a greedy rich bastard. Bottom line. It's not about any of these principles. They don't believe in them. We'll get more on how some of this is falling apart. How am I doing on time? Oh, I can talk and talk then. Okay, we're all worried about the mainstream media. I would encourage you to look more at the marketing media, okay? Mainstream media, definitely concerned, but look at it from the marketing media side of thing. I have an example up here from Motley Fool, which if you're an investor, you've probably seen their little things pop up all the time. They're on what I would call the second or third tier of journalism. You know, you have the Wall Street Journal, you have Barron's, you have... it's mainstream media, but in terms of financial media, Bloomberg, to a degree, they've gone off the reservation a lot. So there's some mainstream financial news, and then there's the second and third tiers. Motley Fool is definitely that second and third tier. They look like financial media. They look like financial advice. They are nothing more than marketing. It is a marketing brochure, okay? I pull these two examples out. They're the exact same day. I downloaded them at the same time. One's about NVIDIA, one's about Apple. That day, one of them was up and one of them was down. They got a little story to catch your attention about why, I forget which one was which, but why is Apple up or why is NVIDIA down? That's the storyline, the hook, right? To bait you. When you click on this, or literally 10,000 other versions of this that day, because all they do is they screen the headlines to see what's up and down. And they've done this before artificial intelligence, but it's getting worse now. They create that narrative. They know that if you own that stock or you're interested in that stock, you're going to go look up, why is Apple up? Why is Nvidia down? So they know they've got the search engine thing there. And then that's about all you're going to read about your particular stock. They may be throwing a little fluff here and there, but once you click into it, and these two articles side by side, I pulled out the key points. They're going to divert you right away. They're almost not going to talk about Apple or Nvidia. They're going to instead suggest their 10 best stocks, right? Not what you are interested in, but their 10 stuff that they want to sell you a newsletter, or maybe they're selling you this stock, depending upon who the marketing person is coming through. The other thing, and there's a couple references here to $1,000. Where to invest $1,000 now? Who listens to my podcast? Okay, what do you know about $1,000 investment? Right? It's my number. It's for savings, right? But it is my number one dumbest listener question. Right? You don't invest $1,000, but investing $1,000 appears at least 2 or 3 times in every one of these articles. And again, the 10 best stocks to buy right now. Like right now, not tomorrow, but right now. They're trying to appeal to that sense of urgency for you. Now they're going to say things like, and I love this. Their stock advice has risen, and this is right out of the article. Both the articles say the same thing. It's 1,072% accuracy rate of returns. They've gotten specifically average return rate 1,072%. Let me tell you something. If they were getting a 1,000% rate of return consistently on their advice, they wouldn't be wasting their time writing articles and paying to have them advertised to you, right? Because they'd take, if they took $100,000 today, and at that rate of return, within 3 years, they'd have more money than even in the world, right? Because of the compounding interest. It's physically impossible. What bothers me about that more is if I said anything close to that, I would get a fine, my license removed, and maybe go to jail. These guys are prominent. These guys are all over NPR, right? For 40 years. They are lying, out and out liars. I would go to jail. Just think about that. Like, why? Why does that take place? Bottom line, I have not watched the news since 1992, and multiple people talked about this. I think Joel mentioned it the most yesterday about your brain and how many thoughts you can have at one time, right? You can really only have one thought in your brain at a time, and your brain is fertile. It's like a field out here, right? If you don't plant anything out there, weeds and stuff are going to grow, but you can cultivate it. You can put in row crops and put in pesticides and use all kinds of bad things on it, put poison on it, or you can plant it on permaculture principles. Whatever you do, it's going to grow in your mind, just like that field out there. Some's going to grow better than others, but it will grow because your brain is fertile in it. And if you don't put anything in there, something will come up. So pick that one thing that you're going to focus on this second and make it good, right? Make it don't plant row crops. Don't plant even annuals, right? Plant perennials. Put good, solid things in your mind. And when you're done with that thought, go on to another good one and another good one. And I can promise you, I can't make any money. I can't guarantee I can make you money. I can guarantee this. If you put good thoughts, good productive thoughts in your mind for 5 years, whether it's a hobby or learning a skill or developing your career, if you do that every day for 5 years, you will surpass your wildest imaginations about being an expert in that particular field. Again, whether it's a hobby you want to pursue, a talent you want to develop, a business or a career, or working for an employer through a career. Focus. Don't pay attention to the news. Ignore the news. There's almost nothing in the news that affects you on a daily basis. Almost nothing. The other day, my wife literally walks into my office. Just the other day, last week. Honey, did you know the government's been shut down? And she had no clue. She had no clue. And that's why I love my wife. She doesn't watch the news either. I mean, she had no idea. The news really isn't there to impact. It's not there to entertain you, not there to educate you. It's there to indoctrinate you. So put good quality ideas in your mind I started to listen to Jack. I wasn't the original guy. I came in late. Right? I was late to the party. But it was about 2011, 10, 11, around that range. I didn't meet him yet. I just started listening around 2010, 2011. Probably 2010 because that's when I moved to Utah. Yeah. But you know what attracted me to Jack? It wasn't gardening. It wasn't the survival stuff. It was reloading. Jack had some really good episodes on reloading. I happened to be searching for reloading stuff. I found a couple of his episodes. I liked it. I thought, man, this guy's pretty sharp, Then I started listening more. And I liked more and more what I heard. And then, eventually went on to meet him. But it all started with reloading, right? I was interested in a hobby and developing an old skill that I used to have. And that's what drew me to him. But I saw his honesty and his integrity and his ability as a teacher. And that's why I gravitated to it, right? And so any of you guys that have been following Jack for at least 5 years know he can change your life, right? We heard that from multiple people. Likewise, do those things, whether it's your religious faith or your education or helping develop your children or your spouse or getting married or whatever you're trying to pursue. Think about it. Work on it every day, day in and day out for 5 years. Sounds like a long time. Sounds like a long commitment, but it really isn't. Again, with my age, man, 5 years, that seemed like this afternoon was 5 years ago to me. And you may say, well, what if I do all that and it doesn't work? What if John told me a lie? Well, what if you don't do it, right? And you're just stupid. Why do you want to do that? Improve yourself. Don't put the poison in your mind because it'll grow. I promise you. If you get into online gambling or online pornography or prepper porn or whatever, it's going to take you down rabbit holes and it's not going to enrich your life like you can develop it. Okay, as far as my prognostication, you guys want to hear about my economic thoughts. And again, these are only just my opinions. 2026 midterm election. I think that's the biggest thing that's going to happen next year. Again, of all the news, the only thing I think is going to matter out of the news is the midterm. We're not going to know how it all turns out until about a year from today. So you know what? Ignore everything until about a year from today and just wake up and see what happens. But I'm cynically optimistic that it may not be as bad as normally happens. Normally the party in power loses a lot of seats during the midterms. Could happen. I don't know if it will or won't. I'm a little optimistic that it may not happen, even though you're definitely going to be hammered every day that everyone's defecting and the mayor of New York is communist or socialist or whatever. You're going to hear all this bad news. Ignore it all. Here's my thought process. The blue team, let's call them the blue team. They're obviously going to put up the hardest opposition of their life, right? If you think they've done things in past elections, they're going to blow it out this upcoming year. There's going to be all kinds of civil disobedience, I think, because that's their normal playbook. And I'm sure, innocent children will be killed or somehow something will tie back to the wicked police or ICE or somebody, and so it'll all be mostly peaceful protesters or someone will get killed. But, and all that's going to happen, I'm totally aware of all that. But I think their coalition has a lot of weakness. And I'll just give you a couple examples. The tech bros, right? I mean, we've seen the Musks come over and the Peter Thiels and those guys, and those are obvious. But almost all of tech has shifted drastically. And it's not unusual that it should, again, because it's their best interests. You go back 50 years ago, all of tech was to the right? They all came out of the defense industry. All those players, Raytheon, Hewlett-Packard, all those guys were extreme patriots from the defense side of things. And it just shifted because their interests shifted. But I think they're shifting back to the right. And again, it's obvious with the people like Musk, but not so obvious with Jeff Bezos. He never came out and endorsed Trump, but he also refused to have the Washington Times endorse Kamala Harris. So, or Washington, did I say the Washington Post? No, Washington Post. He didn't allow the Washington Post to endorse her. So some of it's subtle, but they are definitely, and if you watch where the money's flowing, they are definitely moving to the right. So that's a weakness on the left because they've had that advantage for a good 25 years. Finance. I'll tell you, I've been listening to Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO of JP Morgan, which is the largest bank in the world. Jamie Dimon, some of the stuff comes out of his mouth sounds like it's a quote from Ronald Reagan. He's literally reading Reagan biographies to come up with the stuff he's saying. Finance is definitely moving over. And again, traditionally, for many, many decades now, been on the left side. They're moving over. As far as the woke stuff, I mentioned, I think that overall coalition is breaking. I don't have time to go into it. Look what happened to Germany, what I call the Merkel mistake. I mean, Germany's pretty much been in a recession for the last 3 years. A lot of it has to do, if not all of it, has to do with Merkel's policies over the 12 or so years that she was prime minister there. It is referred to as the Merkel mistake by a lot of people. My cynicism says that it was actually very convenient and planned that way because, and not necessarily she was colluding on it, but the failure of Germany benefited one country than I could think of, and it's the United States. Right? Nobody has benefited more by Germany having problems than the United States. And what she did, a lot of it under woke principles, destroyed their industrial base. Bottom line, from immigration to over-reliance on cheap gas from Russia to shutting down their coal mines and their nuclear power facilities, trying to ban internal combustion engines before they had a technology to replace it. When they are like the number one producer of cars, high quality cars in the world, they just threw it all away, and it was very convenient. It has benefited the U.S. more than anybody else. Things like DEI, again, I never thought they were done for fairness. I think that was a play just to let these people virtue signal. But look at the impact of men in women's sports. I mean, that's kind of one of those undeniable things that you just, if you're going to have women's sports, like XX human sports, XX chromosomes or women's sports, and you let XY humans participate, the XY are always going to dominate. The XX humans cannot compete. So effectively, you're saying you are destroying women's sports. I mean, and that's obvious to anybody that sees it. And so these kind of things, they fall apart of their own corruption, right? They can't last. I keep that in mind if I don't come back to that. The XX humans and XY humans. The climate stuff I mentioned, if you've seen it just in the last week or so, Bill Gates has flipped. Bill Gates is convinced now that the world isn't going to end in 5 years if we, have two degrees of temperature increase. Totally 100% flipped. Why? Because it's in his best interest now. He never believed it before. So a lot of these coalitions are falling apart. The rank and file union workers. I'm from Pittsburgh, so I know what rank and file is. I mean, it's like the guys in the union, the gals in the union, right? The big bosses, yeah, they're all still going to be for the blue team, but the rank and file has pretty much left the Democratic Party. It's almost like the Reagan Republicans or Reagan Democrats from 40 years ago. So I think the blue team has a lot of hurdles, not to say that they can't sweep things next year, but I do think they have a lot of hurdles. On the other side, the red team, again, depending upon how shrewd and smart Trump really is, is this all coincidence or not? But he has front-loaded this first year with chaos, right? The highest tariff rates in 100 years, and from day to day, not even knowing what those rates are, and picking fights with their allies, and just everything you can think of, right? He has just created utter chaos. What do you bet between now and when next year starts that we start getting happy talk from Trump, right? Because Trump knows he can't have if he has a bad economy through the summer into the elections next year, he's done, right? And the day he loses the House, the impeachment hearings start, right? I mean, that's obvious. So he's going to pull out all the stops for happy talk. He's already planning to go to China. President Xi's coming over here next year. There's going to be handshakes and love and cross-border fertilization, all kinds of nonsense, I think, next year. Deregulation is going to kick in. One of the reasons I've been so optimistic, and again, this is not necessarily good because it's good for the planet or anything like that, but deregulation is kicking in. They've reduced a lot of EPA rules. They've reduced all kinds of banking rules. In my little sector of the economy that I work in, just in the last few months, 14 proposed rulings from the SEC are gone. You know how you see my happy face? 14, man, that's unbelievable, right? So these things are happening throughout the economy. They kick in next year. That deregulation, for good or bad, is going to mean more corporate profits. Okay, I think it's going to be a thing. Advanced depreciation on the business expense taxes. Man, cheap old me is I'm buying a car even this year. Because I can fully expense it because it's a business expense. AI productivity gains are real. We're going to see that to a degree or another. When you see the bad news about all the job layoffs, That is bad news. And like Reagan said, you know, you lose your job, your neighbor loses his job, it's a recession. You lose your job, it's a depression, right? So when someone loses their job, it's a bad thing. But you know, when someone loses their job, it's almost always a good thing for corporate profits. So again, keep that in mind. If you're an investor, you don't care about Main Street economy so much as you care about whatever you're invested in. And I think all these things are going to benefit the corporations, which will help potentially Trump keep the red party in for next year. The also thing that's undeniable, and David and others of I have been curious about the numbers because they're too big to believe, but industrial developments, whether you're looking at just data centers or whether you're looking at physical rehab of what's existing or new plants, you know, factories that build things that work, right? Not just power generation or not just office buildings, but things that actually factories that really make things. If you look at the forecasted spending on those things, again, we're talking in the hundreds of billions, right? It's crazy off the chart numbers, and we don't really believe they're that high, but they're going to be historically high, and it's happening, right? I mean, the money's committed, so something is going to happen. It's good for the economy. Lower gas prices, as much as you hear all the complaining about tariffs, and I know tariffs are a tax. I don't argue that. They're consumer tax. They do hurt the economy, but at the same time, $60 oil, when it's been averaging for the last 3 or 4 years at 75 or more, I mean, it's a major reduction. The impact on tariffs is like a fraction of 11% of the economy. Everything in the economy runs off of oil. So I think all these things are going to help the red team next year. AI bubble and valuations being too high, that's a big worry everybody has about the stock market. I'm concerned too. But while I think that AI is overhyped, I don't think it's like the dot-com bubble for a number of reasons. We can talk about that later. The biggest reason, though, that it is profitable for the most part, and it is also very functional. I mean, if you're not using AI as part of your business, you're probably not in business, right? And you couldn't have said that even from the 1996 to 2001. There was a lot of companies that had no or very limited physical connection to the internet back then. So, I mean, there's a lot of spending on it, but it wasn't as already implemented as AI has in business, not even counting people's lives. It's just there, which is why we're spending so much money on power. We cannot power it, which kind of takes me to the next thing. It's checked. I don't think we're going to get as big of a bubble as we saw in the dot-com bubble, because it's not physically possible to build out what they want. And so yeah, so
4-year wait. If you put in a 500 megawatt substation right now, it's 4 years wait time for the equipment.
right. So
You're not even building it.
So in spite of all the hype, right, even if it's real, it's checked by reality. So I think there's a natural market force there. Now, just because a company has AI in their name and they've quadrupled in price in the last 6 months, yeah, they're probably crashing and going to zero. But I'm talking in general, right? The big, the Mag 7, the big companies are involved in this. It's real spending. Again, is it good for the environment? No, but it's happening. Dot-com bubble, and I talked to somebody about this the other day. We confirmed what I would already thought. There's dark fiber in the ground that we haven't used in 25 years. We laid so much fiber 25 years ago that's never been used. And so they don't even have to invest as much as they would have to if it was all new, because there's just excess capacity there that was never used. It's just a matter of getting the power. So I think it's real. It is a business cycle, though. Everything has a business cycle. As you see the semiconductors coming down in price, it just means something else is going to go up, right? Because semiconductors can't be top dogs forever. They're going to run through a business cycle, but then it's going to be another one. So look for that rolling prosperity. Valuations are a concern. They are historically high. They're not the highest ever. They are high and comparable to other bubbles. One thing I would argue on valuation today, why I think they're realer, not necessarily real, but realer, is that they're justified by growth, right? If you look at General Motors 40 years ago, maybe it had a multiple of 15, and a price to earnings ratio of 15. And they kind of say, well, that's the average. That's what a big blue chip stock should have. Well, General Motors was no way growing at the rate that NVIDIA or a Facebook or a Microsoft has grown. So you're willing to pay more for something if it's growing faster, right? So again, it's not that they're not high. I don't dispute that. It's just that it's not as bad maybe as you've been led to believe. I think the big opportunities based on these things and other things I'll talk about here is electrification. If you're from a career perspective or from an investing perspective, anything that has to do with circuits, any kind of electricity, up and down the supply chain, focus on that. I can talk all day about those opportunities if you want to hear later on. Banks and finance. Remember I said Jamie Dimon is sounding like Ronald Reagan and all these banks. They're going to benefit the most and the quickest from deregulation and artificial intelligence, right? They're going to be able to get rid of the most mid-level, minuscule jobs, and deregulation is big time coming for those guys. That's why they're shifting to the right, and they're going to make a lot of money, I think. Also, software as a service. Those guys have suffered the last 18 months to 2 years. I'm thinking of things like Adobe, Salesforce.com, a lot of these big companies that have done fantastic for 20 years. They've been in a lull. Everybody thinks that AI is going to eat their lunch. We all know about the hallucinations and the problems with AI. I think maybe some of these companies are going to get resurrected. So I'm going to be putting some more money in those stocks. As far as my long-term cynical optimism, I really think peak globalization is over. And again, this jives with some other things other people have said. Economic security is national security. And we have either forgotten that for a long time or we just ignored it. And because of that, because post-World War II, and this gets into what Alan was talking about the other day about Bretton Woods and other agreements that have been made, the Marshall Plan after World War II, we had, once we defeated the Germans, America was the only economy standing, right? We literally, I don't know what the statistic is off the top of my head, but something like 80% of the entire gold content in the world was in America after World War II. Because a lot of that loan lease stuff, we collected money for it and we wanted gold. Funny how that works, right? We didn't want Federal Reserve notes. We wanted gold. So all that money came to the U.S. And then over the next 20 years or so, getting to when Nixon pulled us off the gold standard, that thing went from whatever it was, 80-some% of gold reserves down to whatever it is today. That left us as people redeemed their worthless Federal Reserve. Well, they weren't worthless then, they were equivalent to gold. But they had to cut that off or we're going to lose all of our gold. Thus, we went on the printing binge that we've been on. But as part of that, what we did was we sacrificed our economy because we were literally the factory of the world. The way China is today, we were more so then. We were the factory of the world following post-World War II because no one was left. There was no one there. We were the tallest midget, right? And the way we built a coalition against the Soviet Union was to make friends with people. So we offered them things like the Marshall Plan, other things where we built up their economy, and we, more importantly, gave them access to our economy, because just like all this gold reserve we had a huge economy to spare. We were willing to sacrifice it, and we didn't do it because we were nice guys. We didn't do it because we wanted to promote democracy. And there's a reason, right? We did it to buy their friendship for a coalition to fight the Soviet Union. That was the only reason. Well, the Soviet Union, if you haven't noticed, it's been gone for a long, long time, many decades. We've still kept up this policy. We built up China to the extent that it's more of a potent, powerful enemy than the Soviet Union ever was. And now we've got a reverse strategy. Okay, so now again, we've come to the realization that economic security is critical to national security. And we have things like industrial policy, which you may hear tariffs don't work, do work, they raise cost on Americans, blah, blah, blah. Bottom line is tariffs are there to weaken China. That's the result, to slow down and weaken China's economy. And even if they don't have a big impact there, they're at least intended to do that. That's the purpose. We're going to see, so keep that in mind. We're going to see higher prices. I would argue not hyperinflation. This gets back again to our community. We get so focused on the dollar going to zero and all that. I don't think it's going to zero, but it's definitely going to lose value. But it isn't going to be hyperinflation. There will be massive price increases, I think, over the years. But here's the comparison. It's not necessarily because of worse fiscal policy or monetary policy. It's going to be because this globalization is dead. China has exported their cheap products to us for the last 30, 40 years. That can't continue. It's not sustainable. Even if we don't make things here, making them with our allies are going to cost more for a variety of reasons. And so prices are going to go up. I would argue that's not a bad thing. I would also argue It's not inflation. And I'll compare it this way. If I bought this backpack down here I have from John Willis versus if I bought it from Walmart, the price is going to be like 100 times difference, right? But it's not inflation because the one that John Willis makes is going to last 100 years, and the one that Walmart makes is going to last like 3 months, right? So we're going to get, I think, better quality, more reliable, safer products, but we are going to pay more for them. Bottom line, don't bet against the USA. And final chart, communism destroys wealth. Okay, and I'm not anti-Chinese. I love the Chinese people. It's the CCP, it's the Communist Party part that I'm not fond of. This is a chart of the large blue chip Chinese stocks over the last, since going back to 2007, you can see when they peaked. This is priced in US dollars. They're less than half of what they were in 2007, even though it's kind of at record highs in their terms. If you price them in our currency, they're not. And keep in mind, this is in currency. It's not inflation adjusted. So to lose more than half of what you had 17 years ago and then add on the fact of how it's depreciated because of inflation, their economy is really in the toilet. Communism destroys wealth. It not only destroys their wealth and keeps their people enslaved, it hollows out our economy. It takes the economy of Germany and Brazil and France and everybody else and disrupts it because they dominate a market. And this gets back to the XY chromosome thing. Just like an XY human is going to dominate an XX human in a sport, a communist nonprofit model is going to dominate us if we play by those rules. If we talk about free trade where they don't obey the rules or the rules are tilted on their end, we won't be able to win any more than a woman can, beat a man in a sport. So we have to shift. We have to have the industrial policy. I don't agree with all of it, but it is a shift and it's going to occur. And then finally, just a few companies that have been destroyed or nearly destroyed by investing in China because they believed, wow, there's 1.4 billion people there. It's a huge market. I'm going to sell Volkswagens. I'm going to sell Ford. I'm going to sell cups of Starbucks coffee. I'm going to sell Westinghouse nuclear reactors. Yeah, Westinghouse went out of business permanently. We're bringing them back, but they got wiped out by China. These other guys lost almost everything they invested in China. Apple and Tesla are really the only big guys left. Let's see what happens to them. Okay, I think I'm out of time.
Yes,
I'm out of time, guys, but that's what I got.
You're out of time. I'm out of touch. Okay, here's how this is going to work. 15-minute break. And those of you who want to mob John, kindly mob him right outside that door so we can get started.